to the Meditation Conversation, the podcast to support your spiritual revolution. I'm your host, Kara Goodwin, and I'm so excited about this episode. Alan Steinfeld is a legend in ufology, and I'm just delighted to have him as today's guest. If you're interested in ET contact, I highly recommend his book, Making Contact. He's a writer, producer, and speaker in the fields of human potential, metaphysics, consciousness evolution, healing, creativity, spiritual awakening, and cosmic intelligence. He's also the host and director of New Realities. For over 20 years, he's brought cutting-edge ideas in science, health, and spirituality to his audiences. He's interviewed over 3,000 of the most influential people in the world. 12 million people have seen his New Reality videos on his YouTube channel. And we cover so much amazing ground in this episode, discussing the ET phenomenon from the perspective of contactees and the government, science, and more. And we talk about consciousness and its role in ET contact. Alan shares his own contact experience and what he makes of it, and he has some suggestions about my own possibilities of ET contact, which of course I found fascinating. Many amazing insights await you in this episode, so we'll get right to it in a sec. But first, be sure to check out karagoodwin.com. You can get a free 10-minute meditation there. And if you want support for your meditation practice, I have a 21-day online program to help you develop your own practice. And you can also get a personalized recorded meditation/energy transmission to help you get through whatever challenges are showing up in your life. I also have a recorded sacred geometry workshop series available that's very powerful, as well as the Healing Hearth membership where you can get assistance with your questions about meditation and spiritual life, as well as receive tons of recorded meditations and join in our regular online meditation meetups. All of that and more on karagoodwin.com. And now enjoy this episode. Okay. All right, well, welcome, Alan. I'm so excited to be here with you today.
Thanks. It's great to see you again after meeting you in Sedona. So yes, let's talk about anything you want.
Yes, well, I have just devoured your book, Making Contact. Or do you say Making Star Contact or Making Contact?
I just call it Making Contact because the symbol there in the middle, I know I put the symbol in there. I write in the book because the communication is beyond words. It's more abstract. So I don't like to name it, but I like people to cognize it in their ways of understanding these other types of thinking, these other modes of thinking, not just words. We have to go beyond words if we're really going to start making contact, I think.
Yes. Well, that's one of the beautiful things with your book is the different perspectives. It's kind of taking this concept, so to say, of contact outside of with extraplanetary life, extraterrestrial life, and looking at it through a prism with different facets. Yeah. And I'm curious if we just begin with what sparked your interest in this topic in general and motivated you to write about it?
Well, I want to just talk about first why it's all these different myriads with this prism, as you said, because nobody has the whole story. Not me, not the researchers, not the government, certainly. And so something's going on for sure. We all know that. But what it is, how it's happening, who they are, there's so many different opinions, which is fine because when you have a jigsaw puzzle and you don't have all the pieces, which is where we're at, and the government's definitely holding some pieces, but they don't really know what's going on. I mean, I don't think they do. They have more clues than we, but we need to just piece it together like pieces of the elephant and not get attached to our story. So I was fascinated with the scope of the phenomenon because I had an experience when I was younger, but also in 1987 had an experience where I think I was taken aboard a ship. I mean, it sounds ridiculous to say that, right? I mean, isn't it? It's so far out of ordinary. I mean, it sounds like science fiction.
Even after all these years, you still qualify it.
Right, because it is so far removed from the reality that we know, which is sort of like one of the messages of the book. Reality is not what we think it is, but we've been so programmed to look at it through a very narrow window and we're not educated to think that there's something more unless you're maybe living in an indigenous culture and understand, as John Mack says, different ways of knowing. He talks about that because we're just so left brain. We want everything to be logical so we can control the world. And we're obviously not controlling it. There's something bigger happening here. And I think when we let go of that limited way of understanding, the world gets very exciting and expanded and full of infinite possibilities, which is one of the reasons I wrote the book. So to show that there's more to the human experience than we've been told, and human experience as we transcend old ways of thinking. Because one other thing I'll add here is that consciousness, and I know you talk about consciousness, is not a phenomena of the brain, but is received by the brain. So essentially, you can say we are the extraterrestrials. If consciousness doesn't originate from the brain, then we are, I mean, that might be a little far out there. We're receiving this flow from some place beyond time and space.
So that's really funny that you would be like, this might be too far out there. But I literally just wrote about this yesterday. I was writing to I have a community, and I was writing in the forum, change the way you think of your brain. You think your thoughts come from your brain, but what if your brain is a receiver? What if it's actually receiving consciousness, or it is consciousness? It's receiving ideas, it's receiving thoughts, and they're not coming from you. Right. So what does that mean that you can let go of? Because if it's not serving you, it's not even coming from you. So have that little bit of removal. We tend to think of it like it's part of us. And there's a lot of potential healing that comes when we see that in a different way.
Well, I'm glad you get that, you understand that perspective, because that also talks about one of my other favorite subjects besides UFOs and aliens is remote viewing, which I teach. I teach remote viewing courses. So, and I learned it from one of the people that started it at the Stanford Research Institute, Russell Targ. I interviewed him, and then he said, okay, let's do a session. And I learned it. I mean, it's not something you learn, but it's something we already can do. So, but the idea is that consciousness is non-local. So we can see and feel and sense beyond the five senses. There's an facility, because if we are connected to the quantum field, as Joe Dispenza says, then everything in time, space, anywhere is known because we are a part of this infinite creation. It's like your cell phone, just picks up the local number, but if your cell phone dies, it doesn't mean you stop getting calls. It's in the cloud. So it's wherever it is.
Yes.
And then you pick up a new physical instrument and you receive the messages. So it's like that with us, we are infinite, I think. Beyond time and space, and we can access all this infinite knowledge if we just get out of the way, just get the personality out of the way, the part that we think we are in time and space. Because if you identify with that, you miss the vastness of who you really are.
Yes. Well, and if we come back to the different perspectives in your book, because you do go into concepts like this in the book, and you go into, like you mentioned, your own contact experience. But this book is not just about contactees. So this is one of the things that I appreciated so much is, again, those perspectives, because you can pick up a book that has essays from different people who have contact experience, or different people who have studied government programs, or and this one really does a great job of letting it be so many different perspectives. And even though this is such a topic that I'm so drawn to, because of the vastness of the perspectives, I learned new things that I'd never even considered. And one example that really has stuck with me is, unfortunately, I don't remember which author of the essay it was, but somebody talked about what would be the impact on our culture as a human race if we were to have full contact. And when I think of full contact, I think of benevolent beings coming down, landing. We all can see it. It's undeniable. We're all unified in this experience. And he completely caught me out in where my belief system is, because I feel like, they would have so much they could give us. They would have so much technology. They would have so much wisdom, and we could learn so much. And I would be at the risk of being like, okay, I'm done being human, or I'm done with the culture I've grown up in, or I'm done with how I understand society. What do you have for us? And that he was challenging that of like, we want to hold on to our culture, or what role does culture play for us? What role does the society that we've built, and what does it mean if we just roll over and we're like, well, you know what's best for us, so let's give everything over,
Well, that's why it's not happening that way. It's not happening that way because we don't want to worship another being, because I think, first of all, they're not greater than us. They may be smarter, they may have better technologies, but on the essence level, we are the same or equal to that. And so I think it's happening in a very slow process of integration, so we can assimilate in the best way our cultural backgrounds with whatever also is imprinting its ideas of a greater technology with us. So it's not a shock. I mean, it will be shocking, and it is shocking to even read this book. It's shocking to see, I mean, especially people who are totally unaware, but it's also, it's a primer too, because it's gently kind of, it's like the frog in a pot of boiling water. If it slowly turns on, doesn't know it's boiling, but it's like that, so. But I think that's a good point, because if they just show up on the White House lawn, it's kind of like what's going. But if they come and go and integrate, and people write about it, and some people have experiences, and maybe they're not believed or they're believed, there's a slow process of integration that allows the culture to bend and reformat itself into a bigger perspective. I think that's what's happening.
Yes. And I think there is like a finesse or a fine tuning, because we see in our culture, in our media, for example, like our movies where they show up on the White House lawn, and what's the response with humanity? They're here to invade. Let's get rid of them. Let's zap them, nuke them, or whatever it is. And it's like all this violence, right? And so there's that's really in our face. But I also see this other faction where they're our saviors. They're going to save us. That's what's going to save humanity. And it's this rolling over of like, take what you want. I'm yours. And it's a finesse, right? It's neither of those things, but this is what challenged me with this book was to look at myself and my own beliefs and where am I on that spectrum, and is that serving me ultimately? And it really made me reflect and really consider aspects I hadn't considered before, which is really important because we can just get stuck in what we think we know. And
right. No, that's a good point. It's a spectrum of these two extreme possibilities, saviors or invaders. And what if it's none of that, which it seemed like it is none of those things, because we're not being invaded. They're not saving us from the mess we've created, of this planet and that we've gotten ourselves in. So, but it's more about what we're talking, the finesse of consciousness, the applications of consciousness, because how do we use our mind to define reality, to define who we are in time and space? I mean, all the illusions of scientism. Scientism is the kind of belief in science without any facts. Like, just scientists are just saying, no, this is how it is. Just trust us on this. And, it's another fabrication. It's another mythologies that we're taught to believe. And what's happening in meditation and is that we're learning to reflect on what this internal process is. And as we meet these others, I think more comes online. And so the inner reflection can go into different places, I mean, and consciousness can transcend its human realm, or what we've been taught is human. And, I'm sure the great yogis have met all sorts of amazing beings in deep meditation. And somehow these beings, whatever they are, whoever they are able to get into our heads or come into our dreams. They can manipulate our thoughts and perceptions. And I think hopefully it's all for the best, which is like the slow upgrade into, if you upgrade your computer to this new operating system that's beyond the facility, it won't be able to function. But the slow upgrade, which is what's happening vibrationally, the earth is changing vibrationally, and the world is obviously changing. It's not the same as it was, 5 years ago, everything. So there's a slow process of boiling until we reach a place where we can create a new world, new society based on consciousness, based on perceptions and not dogmas and hardware of the government just wants to know what's happening so they can build more weapons. That's why they're interested in UFOs. And that doesn't seem to be happening because you can't create the technology unless you understand how these beings think. That's my theory. So, how they're going to understand what's going on if they and they don't have the thought processes and the evolution of thought to understand who built it and how they built it. So consciousness is really connected to the whole phenomena of what's going on, and the ability to shift thoughts and have new ideas that are outside the box. That's why I call my program on my YouTube channel New Realities, because we're coming into these new, perception. Everything that we see around us is not the totality of what is. There's so much more. And what we've created is a mess for the most part. Yes, it's also beautiful and, all those great things. We could feed a lot of people. We can, have comfortable lives, but, those are also traps because it stops us from expanding out of our comfort zone. So There's always that balance.
Yes. I'm curious if you've seen Three Body Problem on Netflix.
No, what's that?
It's a series. It was based on a book, but I thought about you while I was watching it because there's also something in Making Contact in your book where you talk about the wow factor.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that, well, maybe you should talk about what the wow factor is, but there's one part in Three Body Problem where the scientists are going, and I think they might have even said something about a wow factor or something, but they were like, we're calling it wow. I can't remember, but something specifically wow. And I had just read in your book about the wow factor. But do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, the wow factors of chapters. So the book is made of 11 different chapters by 12 different people. There's a couple, JJ and Desiree Hertog wrote a chapter together. So, and plus my chapter and the introduction by George Norrie. So, but Grant Cameron wrote the second chapter called The Wow Factor, where he says, and you know what? I don't go along with what everyone said in the book, but that's their perspective. And so I don't have to agree with everyone else to include their opinion. So Grant Cameron says that the wow factor is about these ships are showing up just for people to be shocked out of their ordinary way of thinking. He says, do UFOs really need lights on them to travel across the universe from wherever they're coming? Or do they need to do all these zigzag motions or to disappear? They're doing it because we go, wow, there's something going on here. So, I mean, I think partly that's true, but I think there's more to that than just, wow. I don't know what's going on really. I mean, there's something more, but a lot of people have seen these things and have said, wow, or they've been shocked because they have not been prepared. Like two people can be looking at the sky and one person will see something. The other person will not see anything at all because they're not trained or they're not used to seeing things out of the ordinary, like, that famous story of the natives on South America.
I was just going to say that. Yes, please.
Right. So a big part of my book is that you can't recognize something you haven't cognized. You don't, right? Because recognition means to recognize. So how do you cognize anything? How do you become cognizant of anything? Is that it's a learned sort of movement. Like your mother shows you a picture of a horse. You see the pattern recognition, which is cognition. So you see the pattern, you say, okay, that's a horse, that looks like that shape, the head, all that. And then you see something and then you recognize, you go, oh yeah, there's a real horse. It's not just a picture. So, but if you haven't learned to cognize something, you see something out there, you have no idea what it is, and there's no way to relate to it. Well, that's what's happening with the UFO phenomenon. There's no way to relate to something we can't recognize. And it's just like, I think artists and intuitives and empaths are more open to the bigger field, like the shamans of the South American societies. But the ones that have been very limited in their education see things inside the box. And if something's outside the box, well, I don't know what it is, and I'm not going to pay attention to it. I'm not even going to, for people, they don't even see it because there's no framework for placing something in there. And
right,
something like that.
Yeah. Do you want to finish the story that I interrupted about the natives who saw the ship?
Well, just that, you interrupted. You were having the same idea. We were having the same idea.
Yeah, but maybe the listeners haven't picked up on it.
I don't know if it's even true. It's kind of like a modern folk myth now, like the 100th monkey theory, all that. But the native, when the Spanish galleons came across the Atlantic and showed up in South America, some people were not able to see these huge ships for what they were. They may have seen something, but they couldn't put it together. as a ship because they never saw anything like this. And it took the shaman of the tribe, who's maybe more open, more perceptive, more in touch with other realities, to say, no, look at this here. Do you see that, and that? And I show a film when I talk about this in my, remote viewing classes and other classes where, did you ever see the basketball where the basketball's being passed between one team and another? Well, I don't want to give away the punchline, but.
You're talking about basketball from a girl from Indiana, so I'm all ears.
Right. I'll send that to you. It's called misconception. So there's something where it's like, oh, I didn't know that was going on. So I don't want to give it away. Yeah. It's a way of going beyond what you've been told and seeing more to reality. But no one told you that is there. So no one's telling us it's not in the papers, really. I mean, you occasionally get like a strange story of lights seen over the sky. But even in the Pentagon government reports, they say, well, there's balloons and there's anomalous, and there's this other category. They won't even name it. They call it other, or they call it unidentified. I mean, if you see something, how do you identify it as unidentified flying objects? I mean, it doesn't make sense, but yet that is because it's a whole kind of conditioning of messaging. You know, if you control the messaging, you control the perceptions. So we have to deal with expanding our perceptual framework, and that comes down to consciousness and cognition and the ability to know that there's more than what we've been told in reality. Reality is much bigger than any of us can imagine, and maybe can imagine.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Several things that you've said keep circling back to this thing where I'm like, do I mention this? And you've said things enough times.
Please.
Well, it was interesting. As we're recording this, we've just had the eclipse, and I was on a plane with somebody that I didn't know who was sitting next to me, who had come in from Vietnam, who was an American, who was so excited because he was coming up to Indiana to watch the totality of the eclipse. And he is a former professor of astrophysics at a prestigious university. And he's not there anymore. He's now in Vietnam. But I was all ears because he's an astrophysicist. So I'm like wanting to know, what do you think about other dimensions? And what do you think about extraterrestrial life? And he was so firmly in the traditional scientific community and academia that it was really fascinating for me to have that other kind of reflection, because I immerse myself in a world of wonder and in a world of expansion and possibility. And he's been trained to follow what's been discovered and proven, like from a 3D perspective. So when I talked about ETs, or the potential for extraterrestrial life, he started talking about the radio signals that we're sending out into deep space, and it's very advanced and it's very high tech, and we're not getting anything back. And he said, so it really makes sense that there is other life, but we're speculating. If I were to say we have it, I have to speculate, and I'm not in the business of speculating. And I said, well, is it that those radio waves are advanced, or is that primitive, if we're talking about advanced cultures? And then I was talking about, are we only using technology that could identify carbon-based life? Are we dealing with carbon-based life in every extraterrestrial race? And it seemed to me that he hadn't considered that possibility, but the conversation with him kept circling back to speculation versus what we can prove. And which is valid in science, especially Newtonian physics and in the sciences that are based in the 3D. But it takes that expansion. And I kind of said to him, like, I have the luxury of just being able to spitball ideas because I am not in an academic setting. And I don't have people who are like, show me the data on that, and what are you, cite your sources and so forth. I can just armchair it and be like, well, what if it's not carbon-based life we're dealing with, or...
Exactly.
But it was really fascinating because you've talked about like science and what we're being told, but in that community, that is the culture of what is provable. And so it's really interesting, just again coming back to balance.
It's so primitive though, don't you think, to send out? We're not even using radio signals anymore. How ridiculous to be stuck in a little box. Like we're how many I don't remember last time I listened to the radio. So we've gone so far beyond. I mean, other higher frequency signals. I mean, if we don't have the equipment, we won't. And we're just looking for radio signals. It's just very primitive and immature. And the other thing about Newtonian physics, it's like that is 400 years old. You realize Newton invented that, I think, in the 1600s or this early 1700s. But that's 400 years old, or 300. We are running the world on Newtonian physics. Engine out, power. I mean, reaction and causation. What you put out, you get back. That's obviously not what's running these UFOs that show up here and there. There's no propulsion system. They take off in an instant. They disappear in time, space. Sometimes they break up into different forms. There's a whole other technology that I think the government's aware of in their crash retrieval program and in reverse engineering, but they're not telling scientists like this guy who they should be, say, okay, what's going on? And I mean, it's so much more, of a cover up about money than it is about aliens. Who cares about aliens when you're about to overthrow the whole fossil fuel industry with free energy? Because obviously, they're not filling up their gas tanks to get here, who's ever coming from wherever. So if they have this technology that, and Grush, David Grush, the guy, the whistleblower, came forward, says, yes, this is a crime against humanity not to share this technology with the world. So that's a whole other end of the UFO phenomenon. It's not alien, it's government not wanting people to realize that there's more to reality. It's like the church. It's like putting Galileo in prison because he saw that, Copernicus discovered the earth was not the center of creation, but Galileo actually sort of proved it with his telescope, looking out at the universe, at the solar system there. So we are still like being imprisoned by these thought form leaders who don't want us to know the bigger picture of reality and what's possible. And that's the worst part of this. But maybe it's all part of the plan too, to slowly integrate. But I think we're suffering because we're being denied a technology that could really help us in a big way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know you had something to share about the eclipse.
Oh, yes.
And as we have just touched on that topic, please.
Oh, yeah. Because I didn't see the full eclipse this time because I was in California, but I have been in full eclipses or even major partial eclipse. And I don't know if you remember, but when you were watching, but there's something, as the light is changing, it actually affects the thought process. It actually affects how we think and perceive reality. So, the light on other planets, other star systems is not the same. And I think that the quality of life affects consciousness and the quality of your sun. So we're here on this planet and we have a sun, and the sun, I think, qualifies the level of consciousness we exist in. Like that's how we can exchange with animals. We're all here in the same kind of light, but other beings from other star systems have a different quality of light that kind of, that's just my theory, formats their their consciousness hard drive, that formats their ways of thinking based on light frequencies. So maybe you noticed that as the light was changing, if you went with it, the flow of consciousness also shifts its frequency. Did you notice that, or am I just making that
I
up?
didn't consciously notice that. I had my Eclipse glasses on a lot, which affected. I did keep trying to consciously take them off so that I could notice the atmospheric light. But I
Yes.
was so drawn to watching the action on the sun
Uh,
specifically. And you really, even if you wanted to, you can't look at that. I mean, it's just, you can't see anything. It's not good for your eyes, obviously, anyway, but.
well, that's what I wanted to say, though, that light
Mm,
affects consciousness. And if you weren't looking through the glass at point, you could notice that as the light changed, the quality of thought changes. I mean, it happens sort of
mm,
at sunset too, in a way, but it's
yeah.
more dramatic during an eclipse, or even more of a partial eclipse where you're getting like light that's filtered in a different way. I noticed it for myself in partially,
Mhm.
and then yeah, when it's completely dark, it's like night. But the partial lighting or the reflection of the light is another aspect of conscious perception. That's all I wanted
Yeah.
to say.
Well, it's really interesting as you say that because I remember when I was a child, if I was away from home, I had a really hard time in the evening, in twilight. I would get so homesick in twilight, and it became such a pattern that I would dread twilight because I'd be fine all day. I would go up to like my aunt's house for a week in the summer. And that was specifically when it started, but it would happen at summer camp, like sleepaway camp. And I knew it got to the point where I knew I had such a hard time at twilight, which was always really mysterious to me. And I wondered, what is it about this time of day that makes me so drawn to being home? And I wondered if it was like because my mom worked outside the home and that's when she got home. And
Mhm.
maybe I, had a deeper, stronger sense of home. But as you're saying that, I'm like, there's a part of me that wonders if it's a different home,
Right.
and that light is more aligned with a type of light that I'm used to in a part of my consciousness I'm not even aware of.
Yeah. That's interesting, but also what you were saying, I thought of because a lot of UFO encounters happen at sunset. You may have had some, and I don't know, encounters or abductions or visitations that you just at that sunset hour that you may not be aware of.
Yeah, you're right. I don't have any conscious recollection of any encounters myself. I know when I was growing up, and so it was kind of like early 90s sort of time, which was a hot time for ETs. And there was a lot of fear around ETs. And I was really afraid. I mean, it would keep me up at night. I was afraid I was going to get taken. I was also afraid I was going to get kidnapped. I mean, I was afraid of a lot of things. Um, but you have had, well, okay, so you alluded to this. You
Yes,
are pretty sure you've had,
I think.
and I really appreciate how you frame it. You're always like, I think this is what happened, but and this is what I know, and this is what I'm
Right.
not sure about. But what
Well,
can you
I'm not
share
sure
with
about
us?
I don't think anyone's like, when I think I had this abduction and it was regress. But before I get there, I want to say to you, maybe you were because you seem to have some of the symptoms of abduction, being like overly afraid. And what if you were? How would you feel, Kara, if you were actually
Well,
abducted?
right now, where I am in my life right now, I would really love it. Like, I am so drawn to the ET phenomenon, and I feel a connection with different races of ETs and a curiosity. So there's a part of me that would actually really love to have a memory or even some sort of pointer to say like, well, maybe. So I'm definitely open to it, but I just don't hold within myself anything besides curiosity that makes me think that I have.
Well, I just want to say, well, you may be open to it, but I'm happy about, but it's also very traumatic. It's
Yeah.
also like suddenly nothing is what you thought, and it's so distorting to our normal way of thinking, and plus being in the presence of those beings, which are totally a different vibration. It just most people go unconscious. They're not able, they don't have the bandwidth to withstand the frequencies, and not in a maybe harmful and negative way. They're just different beings that vibrate at different ways that we're not trained to being in the company of. And that's one of the things I hope that we can do is start to vibrate at a higher frequency so we can meet these beings on an even playing field, which will allow us to be more lucid in consciousness in their presence. And I think that's another reason they're coming and going, they're appearing and disappearing. But the trauma, I think, is not that they're bad or negative, just they're so different and the frequencies are so different. Like, have you ever been around, like, not a great example, but really crazy people, and you start to pick up on their vibration, you start to tune into, and you start to get sort of weird thoughts in a sense. But when you're around these other beings that don't think anything like us, there's an empathic flow that's hard to process because we haven't been trained in that level of perception. So it can be distorting and confusing, but it doesn't have to be if we start to think in other levels of reality.
Yeah. And it's real, as you're saying this as well, it makes me think of one of my children who had night terrors when they were young, from about the age of, I want to say 2, somewhere around 2 to between 4 and 5 years old. And when that would happen, they were inconsolable. And it was like, and they weren't there. They were shouting and screaming, and I would try to hold them and they would push away from me. But then if I put them back on their bed, then that would make them more angry. And they were in this in-between state. I'm saying them because I have a boy and a girl, and I don't want to throw anybody under the bus in case they don't want me talking about this. But they don't remember. They never talk about it. But it does make, as you're talking about this, I'm like, I wonder if there was something going on, and either they didn't want to come back, or they didn't like where they'd been, or both.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I'm curious if they, when they grow up, if they ever were to or even you, I don't know, maybe you had night terrors, did you? Or you don't remember?
Not that I know of. I don't know. But I'm having a QHHT session actually on Monday. I don't know if you know Suzanne Spooner, who
No. I know Sarah Bresman Cosme.
Okay, they are very close and they do retreats together. So she's like her, in a way they partner in things. And so I do have some questions around like starseed things, and because I don't have a lot of conscious awareness, again, it's really more of a curiosity. But like you say, like the fact that I am curious about it in and of itself, what does that say?
Well, but not just curious, but I'd say you're more than just curious. You're sort of in the vibe of that. But maybe your child did have a visitation or a trauma, and something went, or past life recall, or it comes from somewhere. I mean, we have to trust our imagination is, even in children, it's not just an imaginary friend or whatever children's have. It's a cognition of something.
True.
I mean, it's more than imagination, I think,
Yeah.
And, and for you, so why would I say, like, I think something happens? Because when I was regressed back to the moment where I think this abduction happened, the regressions, like, you don't remember it in the same way you remember, what you did yesterday, what you had for breakfast. It's because you never actually experience it consciously because you're unconscious. So you're not remembering a conscious recall. It's sort of coming to you like a past life sort of memory. It's like, well, I'm not remembering, but I'm seeing these things. And that's sort of how the regressions, the abduction regressions happen based on a sort of sense of the thing, but not an actual memory. Even in any trauma, there's a disconnection. That's what trauma is. It's a disconnection from conscious awareness, and a kind of automatic behavior comes in. Because I studied a lot of trauma because I have been writing about alien abductions and what's happening. And trauma is like a soul fragment breaks off, and you're kind of stuck in this realm, a part of you, and the rest of you continues on as if nothing had happened. And that whole experience is kind of shut out from conscious awareness, which is what happens with the alien abduction. I mean, some people, I break it down to like two different categories. There's contactees, which say, oh, they're light and love. And then there's the abductees, which like, no, that was intense. And I don't know if I really want that to happen again. And sometimes there's a crossover where the abductee says, oh yeah, that was really a positive experience, even though at the time it wasn't. And now maybe I can, a lot of people, whether they like it or not, they do have upgrades in the way they think and the way they can perceive more complex ideas, more multi-level dimensional realities than someone who may not have been abducted, maybe because they have to put these psychological barriers in place, or also because in the abduction experience, or there's a vibrational shift where you're seeing different levels of reality. So this is something we all have to talk about academically, because it's the realities, and it's being ignored because those things don't exist. Or like the scientists you met, it's all speculation. Well, it's not speculation for people who've had the experience. It's a reality.
Yeah. So. Yes. Well, we've kind of danced around your own experience.
Right. Let me, if you want me
yeah. I can just feel people like, I want to know what happened to Alan.
All right. Well, okay, I'll tell you what the lead up was. I'm driving cross country with a girlfriend. It's 1987. It's the year of the harmonic convergence. You probably maybe not remember that, but it was a big moment where a lot of people would come together because it was the first, I call New Age holiday or something. But anyway, it was kind of so I was kind of looking for a place to go, but I met this woman in Sedona, and then we traveled together. It was very romantic and beautiful. And we're coming back. And it was sort of like a setup. There's books where, like, if these ETs set people up in partnership and all that. And I don't know if it was that, but we're driving back east from the West Coast, and we stop along the, pull off the interstate and just go down this little desert road just to sleep. It was a van, just to kind of sleep for the night because we were driving all day. And then we just fall asleep. It's like we just pass out, and we just kind of go. I mean, maybe we were tired or something, but in the morning we wake up and in the same position we went to bed in. It's like we were in suspended animation. And I hadn't talked to this woman in a while. And I said, oh, I wrote this chapter about us traveling. And she go, oh, the night we were frozen. And it's like, yes, it was suspended animation. We woke up in the same position we went to bed in. And who even remembers that? I can't tell you what position. It's like, I'm tossing and turning. But there was some kind of sense that we were taken out of the time and space for a moment and then put back into like what I call a time mold, so a frame of time where, like on a film strip, other things happen and that piece was taken out and then the film was put together. So the frames match. Oh, you're taken out at this So that all I could call is a time mold, but I actually did hear Bob Lazar years later refer to a similar thing where there was this technology where they froze a candle burning and that candle was just frozen in time space. So I came up with this idea of a time mold, and then I got confirmation from, I think it was Linda Moulton Howe talking about Bob Lazar. And so that was strange to have this feeling and then get a confirmation of that. So what happened in that, I was regressed, and I think I saw like these beings standing behind the van, and it was a lot less frightening than I thought it would be because I felt a kind of friendliness of these beings. It wasn't menacing. I mean, it was, yeah, it was more welcoming or something. I don't know, but we
do you remember what type of beings? Were they the
no,
traditional kind of?
Deep, and I just saw beings. They were, I think if you ever look at Art Soldier 77, her things on Instagram, there's these beings with big eyes and no, I don't think they have a nose or a mouth. They're just eyes. And that's sort of what I remember. So I don't know where they're from. And I'm always suspicious of people saying, oh, well, these were Pleiadians, these were Arcturians. I mean, I don't know what that means. You know, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how you can say they're from a certain place, and maybe they are, but I think there's so many races out there, and there's so many, like if you are going to Arcturus, you see there's levels of civilization in time space that exist in more developmental sequences than just what can be named. So, I mean, people, but I don't, I mean, in the QHHP, people say, yeah, I went there. And maybe that's true, but it hasn't been my experience is what I'm saying. So, but these beings were friendly. And I think we both had a sort of vibrational upgrade because it's sort of a personal thing. But after that experience, the sex we had together was like a whole other level of vibration. It was like,
oh, wow.
It was something beyond that, what it was before, you know, it was a real vibration. And I think it was because of this interfacing with these beings that, like I said, you have to kind of rise to a different level of vibration to interchange with them. And people do get blasted with sound and light. That's common in a lot of abduction experiences. I mean, pretty much 90% of the people see a flash of light and hear some kind of vibrational thing that I think is about shifting their frequencies. So I think you come back from those experiences a little shifted, you know.
And you had didn't you have some physical indicators too? Because the QHHT was years or decades later, 2 decades later, maybe, or 3. But you right away had some markings, right?
Well, I didn't actually notice it. It was my mother who noticed it. She said, what's that 4-pronged puncture mark on the back of your knee? And like, who looks at the back of their knee, right?
Right.
So it was it was a couple of days after that experience, and these were scabs that, I said they must be like some kind of spider bite or something like that. But you know, the strange and odd thing was that I was living in New York and I started to meet people associated with Bud Hopkins. You know who Bud Hopkins is?
I don't think so.
He was not an early researcher, but he's someone who he used hypnosis, but he was one of the major figures in the alien abduction, in the contact experience. He wrote a book called Missing Time, where he coined that term. His books are great. They're really Missing Time, The Watchers, Intruders. These are all.
I have heard of those. Okay.
He actually exposed John Mack to the whole alien contact thing. And John Mack, did you know who John Mack was from my book or from other parts?
I think I'd heard of him before, but definitely got more acquainted through the book.
He was the head of the psychiatry department at Harvard, who started to meet people claimed to be abductees, and he said these people must be crazy. But until he started talking to them, and he would use a gentle hypnosis, see, these people are having real experiences. So he came out and started to speak up for people's experience. Yeah. So anyway, getting back to my thing. So I had this thing that I showed people, and I was starting to meet some of the Bud Hopkins people and Bud himself. And they said, yeah, that's an abduction, Mark.
Mm.
And that did two things. It freaked me out. It's like, oh no, that strange night where I felt like I was frozen in time was something. And it made me obsessed with the subject. It's like actually that happens in trauma where you do everything to avoid it and you also can't stop thinking about it. It's like it's a strange duality that happens in traumatic situations. So I wanted to know everything about what was going on. And then I started to go to all the conferences and meet all the people. That's how I was able to write this book. I just called these people up. You know, if you go to enough conferences year after year and see the same people, you go out to lunch and dinner with them, you hang out. So I just called these people up, like Linda Moulton Howe, who's a fantastic. Did you see her speak?
Yes.
Wasn't she amazing?
Yes. Yeah.
She knows more about this phenomenon than anyone else. She has a lot of the pieces of the puzzle. But, you know, I just call them up and say, hey, would you like to write a chapter for this book I'm calling Making Contact? And they say, sure, because we're friends, you know, and they want to put more of their information out there in different ways. So this was a pretty, in a way, easy book to write because it was a really nice overview of people I already knew that were really top in the field. John Mack was no longer alive, but I knew his archivist because I had met John and I did some videos I did an interview with John Mack. I had great pick. So anyway, I called these people and they all gave me their different perspectives. But getting back to that was the result of my obsession. I'm saying that because, you know, when you discover something's going on, it's like, what is it? And yeah, part of like maybe you, you know, I don't remember, but a part of you is like, I want to know everything I can about the subject. I'm not saying you're an abductee, but I'm saying you might be. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
like everyone could. I mean, some people are saying at least 80% of the population. I mean, you should interview Alexis Brooks. She has a whole theory. If you have some sort of phobia, it might be related to this phenomena that you don't know. Like, actually, I mentioned my mother, and I think they go through generations of star seeding, where every generation they slightly upgrade the DNA. So when they get to a certain mixture, they can integrate their DNA, the ET's DNA, with our DNA more in a more cohesive way. So there's you and your children. So, and then there's this mix. So I think it followed my grandmother, my mother's mother, my mother, and then me, because and there's blood types, and my mother's Rh negative, and there's that sort of modification of the blood, which makes it, I think, it's just my theory, more um, uh, integratable with the DNA of ETs and making these hybrids, which is the ultimate reason why I think they're doing these things, is to create a race of beings that, and this is my theory, I'm sure you've heard it, where what they want from us is our capacity to feel in with their amazing intellect. Because if you're just intellect, then you miss the whole point of creation, and they bred that out of them. So they're integrating our emotional capacities to feel, to emote, to love, to care, all those things that are really the reason we've incarnated. So I think they're creating a hybrid race that will have the best of both species. And that's, other people said that, but it's also makes sense to me. And
yeah.
And So, I say that I mentioned my mother because she has a strange fear of cats. And it happened after she would get lost in the mountains of Tucson. And I said, well, what is it about cats that are so scary? Because I love cats, they're great.
Mm-hmm.
He says it's their eyes. And that is a little trademark and, secret. Because she doesn't go along with any of this stuff. So it's just like,
Yeah.
she said to me after I wrote this book, you don't really believe that. And I said to her, not only do I believe it, I made a career at it.
Yes, right. That's fascinating about cats because I don't have, like I've already said, but I don't have conscious awareness of any contact, but I do have experiences where I'm in another realm. I'm in like a quantum realm and I'm no longer have form, but I'm in like patterns and shapes and geometries and colors and sometimes I see like a portal open, like or that, like it was interesting right before the eclipse, 2 nights before the eclipse, I saw like a dark kind of sphere and an iridescent like almost ultraviolet sphere phase together, and then it like the energy of it or the light of it kind of started dancing and sparkling as they phased together, which felt like a portal.
And it was a portal. I bet you did see a couple of nights before you said you saw that?
Yeah, it was Saturday night.
I wonder if that's when the earthquake hit the East Coast.
Oh, yeah. See, I was on a cruise. This was
the shift. Anyway, I think the eclipse and the earthquake were related somehow.
Which I only just have kind of briefly understood that happened. I didn't have internet. I was totally off the grid because I was on a cruise with my family for spring break. So I was like really out of touch. And then I saw something on Instagram yesterday where I was like, oh, there was an earthquake. And then I'd heard there was one in Taiwan or something as well.
Oh, yeah. There was a big one in Taiwan. There was a minor one in New York. But as you're describing these portals and these shapes and these things, you look up Art Soldier 77 on Instagram.
Okay.
Kamara Jones is the artist, but she draws these interdimensional ET beings with light, language, and colors and portals and all that.
Oh, okay. I'm going to look that up. But that's kind of my, those are more like I'm conscious of those. I know I'm still here on Earth, and I'm also like my consciousness is experiencing something else. But I keep like coming back in like, I'm still in bed. Like, because it's usually as I'm falling asleep. That's not the right way to say it. It doesn't happen usually. It happens sometimes. Right. I don't know if anybody has shared with you, but when I was reading your book, I felt that I received activations because I had one in particular where I had that sort of, out of body is the wrong word because I am in body. It's quantum. It's like a quantum awareness.
Yeah.
And I don't remember where I was in the book when it happened, but I at least had the idea that the book had something to do with it. So I'm not saying that I received the information that the book did it, but I had the idea that I was primed. Like, what if I was primed? This is how I'm always careful about how I say things.
Yeah.
But it did feel like there was something in what I was reading, not even within the words, but something I was receiving that kind of primed me to be able to have that particular experience at that particular time.
I did hear that from other people. I have heard that. It's like, I don't know what it is. I don't know but yes, not everyone, but there are people who have said that and it wasn't like, I don't know, maybe it's just a part of a bigger picture, but there are books I have read where I have felt that, like Paul Selig's book, I Am the Word, that his teachings, his writing?
I know of him. Yeah, I have not read his books.
Oh, his books are activation. And there's others, but I'm happy to hear this book is. That's so nice. And
Yes.
yeah, I think it's part of, I think I'm assisting and you are too in this integration of these other realities because it's obvious. I mean, despite what your scientist on the airplane said, it's obvious that there's something going on here and it's bigger than anything we have known. It is a moment of truth for humanity. I think it's very exciting. And I think it will be a renaissance in of human civilization if we could really integrate whatever's happening here into our cultural forms and transcend the wars and the awful things that humans have created. I always say there's much more to fear from humans than there are from ETs, right? I mean, we're the dangerous.
Right. Yes, completely.
So
Well,
this is I'm really excited about, well, talking to you, you spreading this word, just like me and a friend used to call ourselves UFO evangelists because it's
yeah.
like, this is a message, but it's not something we're saying. The government is saying this. Whistleblowers, people inside governments and pilots, Air Force, people are saying it's, the secret is out or it's about to be. And it's slowly leaking out. It's a slow little dripping leak, but it's leak.
Well, right. And I wonder, going back to how we started this conversation, if that's the plan, like if the government's not going to do it, if they're going to hold on to and hide for whatever reason, even if they just think we can't handle it and it would make everybody crazy, like even if let's say they have good intentions, but if it's happening person by person where our understanding and our consciousness and even our experiences are showing us like, well, clearly there's more going on than what I'm being told in the mainstream, because I know it for myself, because I've seen it with my own eyes, or I understand it, it makes sense to me, or whatever it is. That's a very valid way for this transition to happen.
Well, even that thing you just described where you saw the light chain and it was some kind of portal, trust, you're not just seeing a fabrication, you're seeing an actuality that, on some level is real. It's there. It's like we have to trust our experiences. And yeah, maybe there's distortion, but you're experiencing something, Kara. And so are a lot of people. But since it's outside what we call reality, most people ignore it. But I'm saying to you and everyone listening, don't ignore your experience. Trust your experience. And, there are crazy people out there, and you can tell because they don't question they say, oh, this is true and this is this. And Rumi says, run away from people who have the truth or think they have the truth and run towards people who are looking for the truth, because, all we have is our experience, but there's fanatics out there too that, I think it's always good to have a little skepticism, keep you sane and sober, and not to deny what also happened. So yes, this happened, but something, and it's like, yes, maybe there are some people who really do know. And I think someone like Whitley Strieber wrote the book Communion. I asked him, Whitley, because, I know him, he wrote a chapter in the book. I said, do you ever doubt like this? Goes, no. And I do believe he's absolutely sure, because he's had more lucid experiences than most people. So he keeps going back. And, once you visit those realms enough or that have that interaction, you sort of get used to like the fabric of that reality. and it's like, oh yeah, I'm back there again, or something.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like these pathways are carved. That's what I'm finding, where it becomes easier to get. And it's like, oh, I know this place,
Yes.
and it's like, okay. And sometimes like there'll be like, I can see the shadow of it almost. And I'm like, I'm almost there. How, and it's like trying to kind of use memory, there's a lot that goes into it. It's very layered, but it's like, it's right there. How do I remember how to get there?
I don't want to scare you, but you're talking like an abductee. But that's okay.
Yes, it is.
Oh,
And something,
no, I'm just saying it might be something else. What were you going to say?
yeah. Well, I was going to say, you also made me think when I had a recollection of that phasing in of the portal, I didn't actually remember it right away, but I woke up the next morning and I felt so different. And I was like, and I felt this happiness, this like anticipation. And I was trying to figure out and remember why I felt that way. When you like wake up and you're like, something happened and maybe you don't feel good about it, or you like maybe something bad's going on and you haven't quite remembered it yet, or maybe something great has happened and you don't quite remember it yet. But this went on for a while. Like I was up and walking around and I'm searching my memory. And then I'm projecting into the future. What is this? Is it the eclipse? Am I just excited about the eclipse? I'm going home today. Am I excited to see my pets? Am I excited? Like, where is this feeling coming from? And none of it was giving me a yes. It was like, yes, I am excited to see my pets, of course, but that's not the origin of this. And then I remembered the portal and it clicked in, and I was like, it was like something locked in.
Yeah.
And as soon as I remembered the portal, that I got the yes. And I was like, that's what happened. And I felt different. I mean, I felt like a different version of myself, but I'm back, and I think I'm just integrated.
Thank you for sharing that. That is great. And that does happen actually sometimes with contactees, or like years later, something clicks in. It's like there was this whole other chapter of things that happened that they had completely blocked out. And then somebody says something, or you read a book or something, and it just clicks on, and you remember all this other stuff. And it's sort of like, maybe that's planned or maybe whatever, but that way you described it is sort of what happens to people sometimes,
Yeah. Yeah. It's fascinating. So interesting.
It is, which shows you just what the complexity of consciousness and overlays and all that.
Yeah. It kind of makes me feel like, what the heck do we know? It's like,
right. What the bleep do we know?
Right. It's like the deeper I go, the more I learn, the more I experience. It's almost like it doesn't make me feel like I know more. It makes me feel like I have no idea. This is such a vast universe, and there's so many possibilities. And I'm like, so much could be true that I have no idea. Don't even have the faintest idea of it being a possibility. You know what I mean?
Isn't that exciting though? Doesn't it make the whole thing?
Yeah, it's so fun.
It is fun. And we're trying to just, and the kind of excitement in this field is like, because nobody knows anything about it really, it makes it like, oh, everyone's on an even playing field. Like we can put together for me what's really going on, or what I think is going on. And it's as valid as anyone else's really. And, yeah, I think we're really in exciting times because we're about to figure out or understand the next level of reality. Like in complexity theories, the old system has to break down completely. And then there's another underlying, more complex, more stable structure that takes the place when there's too much information coming into an old system. There's another level of complexity that arises that is stabilizing the new information. And that's sort of, I think, what's happening to us. It's getting more complex, but also we're realizing that the universe is much more complex and we're much more complex. Consciousness is much more sophisticated. It's not just like I interview Deepak Chopra sometimes, but most of the time he says, oh, it's just all consciousness. You know? And I say, Deepak, what's the application of consciousness? So that's the key. I think we're learning that. And I'll just tell you one little story about meditation.
Please.
I was a really hyperactive child, maybe because I was some starseed or something like that, but I could never fall asleep, especially if it was light. And there I'm like 2 or 3 years old and I'm just, tossing and turning in bed. And I remember this until I closed my eyes. And then I just remember, okay, if I close my eyes and just look into the infinite darkness or something, I could feel a sort of calmness, and then I'd see like a light, and it was like a very early form of meditation. I'd see this white light and just be traveling on that light when I was like 2 or 3 years old. And I didn't know what I was doing, but it was like my own little creation that helped me kind of feel more objective about the world. Maybe it's the Aquarian birthday, but also feel like I wasn't caught up in a lot of the human drama because I knew there was this infinite world within us and outside of us. So I don't know, just fits in with your meditation conversation.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that, because it also triggers, you have so many things that I'm like, yes, and me too. Because within really recently, like within the last maybe 2 or 3 months, I've had this, what I'm calling like, I don't even know if it's a real memory. I have this memory and I don't know if it's real, but I do remember being in bed, and I must have been about 4 years old because of the house that I was living in. And I, like you, except I think I was waking up rather than going to sleep. And I could see these lights, like these circular lights. And I feel like this is where the memory comes in, where I'm not sure if it's right or not. But I feel like I asked my mom what the colors are, what the colored lights are when you close your eyes. And that it was like just a rational explanation that I took for like, oh, okay, it's nothing. Basically, it's nothing. It's your brain firing, whatever it was. It was something physical, and it just told me it was nothing special. And looking back, I question now. I'm like, I think that was it. There was an intelligence to those lights, and then I learned to ignore them and that it was nothing. But I remember I felt like I had some sort of relationship with it. You know, but also I have a memory of eating food and feeling like almost sorry for my food as I ate it, because like when I eat these peas, then the peas that are on the plate are going to miss their friends that are now in my tummy, and maybe they'll be, let me put some more of their friends in my, so it's like I felt like I had this relationship with everything. So who knows if it was really like, if I'm making more of that memory.
No, I didn't think making more of it. It kind of helps you with your unique perspective. It's very shamanic what you're saying. So it's what made you different than a lot of people who just, want to, watch their kids and take them to football game or whatever. It made you like, no, I want to do a podcast. It's like, or explore these other, or even read a book like mine. It's like those things are qualities which, you can appreciate because, you've been in training to awaken other people. And so, congratulations.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, I could talk to you forever. I have loved every second. I can't believe that it's the time that it is. I'm so sorry. I hope you didn't have something going.
I enjoyed this too. I enjoy your intelligent conversation, your humor, your perspective. No, I think I've had a good time. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Well, tell people how they can find you and new realities in your book and everything.
Right, right. So I've been doing for the last, I don't know, since YouTube began 20 years, a YouTube channel called New Realities, youtube.com/new realities, which interviews all the people channeling, all the experts in the field of UFO contact and researchers. And so that's been going on. And not just that, but consciousness people and um, artists and scientists. Bruce Lipton is one of my favorite interviews. So that's on my YouTube channel. And also, I wrote this book called Making Contact. Is that reversed on your Oh, there it is. Yeah.
No, it's not reversed
All
on
right.
mine, but mine looks reversed. Is it reversed to you?
Oh, mine looks reversed here.
No, it looks right to me.
Anyway, um, so yeah, you can pick up the book on Amazon, which is the best way to get it. Just go to it was on the bestseller UFO list, which was great. And then
Oh, that's
I'm
awesome.
also speaking at conferences. I'm speaking at Contact in the Desert coming up in the end of May. When will this be posted? Around
I'm not sure yet, but by then I'm sure.
Okay, the end of May, May 30th, June 2nd is Contact in the Desert. I'm doing lots of conferences. I'm going to be at the Conscious Life Expo next year in LA. I am doing there's a galactic cruise that I'm doing that you just got back from a cruise. You might like to go on a galactic cruise with a bunch of other galactics down the Yucatan. I'll
Ooh.
send you the link for that. You could put it when you post this. That'll be
Okay.
really fun. There'll be lots of great people. I think Sarah Cosman, Brexman Cosme is going to be on that cruise, and
Oh,
along with Vivian Chavez.
oh,
Who,
I love her. Yeah,
yes,
she's going to
right.
be on
So
soon.
I'm speaking a lot, which is fun. I'm writing another book, which is sort of beyond contact, more involved in what actually happens as far as I can see. Uh, um, what's really going on in terms of the evolution of consciousness as we interface with these beings and how we get beyond the fear, which a lot of people still have, a lot of mainstream have. And, you know, like I think we've decided they're not here to invade us, like all the projections. Those are just what we think, but it's not what's real because they're just coming from the past. So what's coming, and I don't want to like make a prediction, but it's like it's different than anything we can think of. It anything we think it is only contained within the limits of human thought. And what we're being exposed to is something that's a huge upgrade that we have yet to even conceive. It's beyond the imagination, which is great, makes it exciting. Most people fear what that would be because they're only projecting what they can imagine, but something that's beyond imagination. We've already, look, human history has been full of the worst that people can do to each other. Those are things imaginable. What we can imagine, I think, is just exciting. It's a just possibilities that will take us into unknown realities, which is it's it's about where we're supposed to be as ongoing, evolving beings in a planet that's not been quarantined or locked down in a matrix that keeps us very stuck in limited thinking. We're about to reach unlimited possibilities, which is what's happening all the time. You know, when I studied with the Aborigines, I spent time with them in Australia. Their religion is Dreamtime. And what Dreamtime is, where you can break, let go of your normal thinking and let the flow, I call it the Tao, the infinite flow through your consciousness so you become one with the current of the quantum field. That's what I would
Mm.
say. And that's possible for all of us. And that's where, you know, inventions and creativities and discoveries all lie in the unknown. They all lay in that realm because we're about to discover more unknown, like you say. And that's only going to uplift us, I think. Yeah, that's a little spiel.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Alan. Thank you for all the work that you're doing, that you've been doing for decades to help
Mm.
advance everybody into new realities, and
Yeah.
for creating your book, and for being here today, and for everything you're doing to help
Oh,
lead us.
that's so
Appreciate it.
sweet. Thank you, Kara. People can reach me at newrealities@earthlink.net. I take emails, and, I love talking about this because it is so unknown. It's something that just keep feeding the creative mind to start to integrate. And there might not be an end to this because it's like art, there's no end to what creation can give us. So,
Right.
but thank you for being so kind and sweet and intelligent and
Oh.
and with me in the conversation. You're not just asking questions, we're discovering something together, which makes it more exciting.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Thank you so much.